In the wise words of our Nigerian elders, when the wind changes direction, the wise sailor adjusts his sails, a proverb that reminds us how leaders and institutions must respond to shifting realities and public will to avoid being left behind. This insight captures the moment unfolding in Nigeria's Senate, where intense public pressure and protests have prompted lawmakers to reconsider their position on election result transmission, ultimately approving a hybrid system that blends electronic and manual methods. On February 10, 2026, the Senate convened an emergency plenary session amid growing protests outside the National Assembly complex. What began as strong resistance to mandatory real-time electronic transmission evolved through a deliberate process of debate, procedural maneuvers, and compromise into the adoption of a hybrid approach. The session opened with heightened tensions as senators revisited Clause 60 of the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. Senator INEC IReV tabled a motion calling for each lawmaker to cast an individual vote on whether electronic transmission should be made mandatory, emphasizing personal accountability over block decisions. After a robust and sometimes rowdy discussions, the Senate agreed to rescind its earlier rejection of stronger transmission provisions. The matter was then recommitted to the Committee of the Whole for fresh deliberation. In the revised clause, presiding officers at polling units are now required to transmit results electronically to the INEC result viewing portal, including details of accredited voters. However, in cases of network failure or other communication challenges, the physical Form EC8A results sheet remained the primary document for collation, verification, and declaration. This hybrid model positions electronic transmission as the preferred and primary method while retaining manual backups as a practical safeguard, effectively balancing technological advancement with Nigeria's diverse infrastructural realities. If this evolving story about the foundations of our democracy resonates with you, and you want to stay ahead of how these decisions will shape the 2027 elections, please like this video, share your views in the comments on whether the hybrid approach is a fair compromise, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss critical updates on the issues that determine the voice of the people. To fully grasp why this hybrid outcome emerged, it is important to trace the legislative journey that led here. The 2022 Electoral Act marked a significant step forward by introducing electronic transmission as an option, driven by lessons from previous disputed elections where manual processes invited allegations of tampering. However, the 2023 polls revealed practical challenges, including delays in uploading results and technical issues that fueled public distrust. When the current amendment process began, the Senate initially leaned toward retaining INEC's discretionary powers, arguing that mandatory real-time transmission could create legal and logistical problems in areas with poor network coverage. This position passed during the third reading on February 4, sparked immediate backlash. Civil society groups, opposition figures, and ordinary citizens organized protests at the National Assembly, demanding full mandatory electronic transmission to ensure transparency and reduce human interference. The outcry grew louder, with demonstrations continuing even as the Senate met. In response to this mounting pressure, Senate leadership called the emergency session. The process inside the chamber involved several key steps. First, the adoption of a motion to rescind the previous decision on the clause. Second, reopening the debate to allow senators to air concerns about infrastructure gaps versus the need for credibility. And third, crafting a middle ground amendment that makes electronic transmission compulsory where feasible, but explicitly preserves the manual results sheets as the authoritative fallback. This compromise was reached after weighing arguments from both sides, those pushing for full modernization and those cautioning against excluding parts of the country due to connectivity issues, ultimately aiming to strengthen public confidence without creating unenforceable mandates. Key actors played visible roles in steering the outcome. Senator IReV's motion for individual voting highlighted the desire for transparency in the legislative process itself. Senate President Godswill Akpabio guided the proceedings, stressing that the goal was never to reject electronic transmission outright, but to make it workable across Nigeria's varied terrain. Other senators contributed to the debate, with some advocating for the hybrid model as a realistic solution that aligns with INEC's operational guidelines while addressing public demands. Outside the chamber, protesters maintained a peaceful presence, underscoring the public stake in the decision and reinforcing the pressure that prompted the emergency sitting. The implications of this hybrid approval are multifaceted. Politically, It represents a partial victory for reform advocates and demonstrates the Senate's willingness to respond to public sentiment, potentially reducing polarization ahead of 2027. It may also facilitate smoother harmonization with the House of Representatives, which had passed a stronger version. Socially, the move could help rebuild trust among voters, especially young people and urban dwellers who expect modern standards, while reassuring those in rural areas that their results will not be invalidated by technical failures. Economically, greater electoral credibility supports stability, encouraging investment and reducing the disruptions that often follow disputed polls. On the security front, transparent processes can minimize disputes that have historically led to unrest, promoting national cohesion in a diverse federation. Public reactions reflect a mix of cautious optimism and continued skepticism. Many Nigerians, especially supporters of opposition parties and civil society, welcomed the inclusion of electronic transmission as progress, but criticized the hybrid fallback as potentially opening doors to manipulation. Protesters outside the National Assembly voiced concerns that the manual option could undermine the very transparency they sought. On the other hand, some analysts and ruling party voices praised the decision as pragmatic, arguing that a purely mandatory system would disadvantage regions with infrastructural deficits. Legal experts have noted that the final harmonized bill will determine how effectively this hybrid balances innovation and practicality. Looking forward, the focus now shifts to the Harmonization Committee, where differences between the Senate hybrid version and the House's more stringent provisions must be reconciled. If the stronger elements prevail, Nigeria could see a more robust framework for 2027 that significantly reduces opportunities for result tampering. However, if the compromise language dominates, further advocacy through protests, public campaigns, and possibly judicial review may follow. For the Independent National Electoral Commission, the outcome provides clearer operational guidelines, though challenges around network coverage and training presiding officers will remain. Ultimately, the true test will come during the next general elections, when citizens assess whether this hybrid system delivers results that reflect the genuine will of the electorate and restores faith in the democratic process. As we conclude this examination of a pivotal day in Nigeria's electoral reform journey, where protests and legislative maneuvering produced a hybrid solution, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Does this compromise strike the right balance, or is more needed for full transparency? If this narrative has given you clearer insight into the process and stakes involved, like the video, subscribe to the channel for continued in-depth coverage of Nigeria's democratic development, and turn on notifications so you stay informed as the story progresses. Your engagement helps ensure these critical issues remain in the spotlight.